Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Man, I am so pumped that football is back. What an absolutely incredible way to start the season. Minus 2 poo slingers on Friday. Some cracking games, some great results, apart from the Wars in Vegas, which we won't talk about just yet. Now, before we get stuck into my tips for round 2, let's, as always, look back at last week. So last week we tipped 4 out of 8 games. A pretty disappointing result, if you ask me. I was always going to take the Warriors in Vegas, and then both the Tigers and Dolphins only lost by 2 points, so they really could have gone either way. It is what it is. We'll look to go bigger and better this week. And speaking of results, make sure you are signed up to the JDB Selects tipping comp on ESPN Footy Tips. We have 3 great prizes up for grabs again this season, and entry is completely free. And big shout out to Toby's Tips for taking out top spot for the first week of the new season, even recording a perfect round with a margin of just 12. So a great result for Toby Tips, Knight Rider, Jaden and SB Teal. 4 perfect rounds to start the season. Congratulations, you guys, and big ups to everyone in that top 20. We are coming for you though, so lock in. Also, just quickly, do consider becoming a channel member either through YouTube or via our Patreon. Already this season we are up 43 units. That's $4,305 of profit if you are 100 unit size better, which is an incredible result. We had a massive bang on the Eels and Storm game yesterday, tipping out a $71 multi that got up. So an absolutely cracking way to start the season for the bets. So if you do want to support the work that I do, please consider joining either our Patreon membership or our YouTube membership. You get the exact same perks in our Discord, as well as our premium NRL analysis and data sets. All right, now let's crack into my tips and predictions for round 2. Alright, round 2 gets underway on Thursday night with the Newcastle Knights hosting the Dolphins at McDonald Jones Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Knights, they kicked off their 2025 campaign with a scrappy, low-scoring win against the West Tigers, 10 points to 8. Newcastle certainly had the better of the chances all game, but came up with some unbelievably poor options and failed to cash in on all of their field position. Dylan Lucas, James Schiller and Fletcher Sharp were all standouts, showing their speed and footwork. The big talking point though going into that game would be the Newcastle Knights halves, and I think both Cogger and Sharp showed glimpses of what they could produce given the chance to build their game together. It was an ugly win, no doubt, but 2 points is 2 points no matter how you get them. And in terms of teams list for Newcastle, no new injuries, so I would expect Adam O'Brien to field the same 17 again this week. And as for the Dolphins, they fell agonisingly short in their season opener against former head coach Wayne Bennett and the Rabbitohs, 16 points to 14. Although they probably didn't deserve to win, it felt like they had the better and more frequent chances, but came up with too many errors in the red zone. I felt that they really missed Cody Nikorima in the halves, as Sean O'Sullivan produced some pretty ordinary moments, and really struggled to create space for the likes of Hamiso, Avarillo and Farnworth. Fair play to the Dolphins though for moving that game to Sydney on short notice and giving it a red hot crack, but personally there wasn't a lot more to be excited about in their first head out of 2025. Now in terms of teams list for the Finns, new recruit Kulikefu Finifuiaki will miss Thursday night's match after failing his HIA. Alright, looking at the two sides head to head, the Knights, they lost their first outing against the Dolphins 13+, but have won the following 3 games straight, all by 1 to 12 points. So because of that, I am going to take the Knights here by 1 to 12 points. I think the Knights will be better for the run last week. They had plenty of chances against the Tigers and failed to ice it. And if they can improve their handling, especially out on their edges, I do think they can do a bit of a number on the Finns at home. So for me, Knights 1 to 12. Moving now to the first of 2 games on Friday, we have the Warriors back at home at Mount Smart taking on the Manly Sea Eagles. Alright, starting first with the Warriors, they failed to fire a shot against the Raiders, getting thumped 30 points to 8 in front of a packed Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. The Kiwis were put on the back foot right from the word go and struggled to generate any go forward. Some questionable selection decisions from Andrew Webster, especially in the halves and with his bench rotation, meant that they didn't have the experience or firepower to turn the momentum, often looking a touch lost. They'll be desperate to make amends for it this week in front of their home fans. Now in terms of teams list for the Warriors, they didn't pick up any new injuries in Las Vegas, and given the way Andrew Webster was talking post-game, I doubt he'll make any, if any, changes just yet. And as for the Sea Eagles, they put on an incredible attacking display in front of a sold-out Brookvale Oval, thumping the North Queensland Cowboys 42 points to 12. It was all one-way traffic with Tom Trbojevic, DCE and Haumole Olakau'atu having it all their own way. Manly, they've certainly never struggled to score points, especially when Turbo is fit and healthy, but if they can shore up their defence and continue to hold teams out for long periods of time, they are certainly favourites to go deep into September this season. And in terms of teams list for the Sea Eagles, no new injuries, so expect Seabolt to field the same 17 again this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Sea Eagles, they have won 4 of the last 6 games against the Warriors, and it really should be 5 of the last 6, if not for that controversial draw last time they played over here in Auckland. Alright, and in terms of tip for this one, as much as it pains me to say it, you have to take Manly here by 1 to 12 points. They looked phenomenal against the Cowboys, and the Warriors, I don't think it's our year, guys. I don't think it's our year. Alright, and the final game on Friday has the Penrith Panthers taking on the Sydney Roosters at their new home for this season, CommBank Stadium. Starting first with the Panthers, they emphatically shut down any doubters that a 5th consecutive premiership wasn't more than just a pipe dream, beating the Cronulla Sharks in a thriller 28 points to 22. Now, I did tip against the Panthers last week because I still find it so hard to believe that despite losing even more key players in key positions, that they continue to look as strong as ever. Isaiah Yeo and Nathan Cleary have cemented themselves as 2 of the best players to grace the National Rugby League. Look out everyone, as they're not going anywhere just yet. Now in terms of teams list for the Panthers, Casey McLean could be included again this week given the long turnaround between games, but it will obviously depend on his concussion symptoms. Brian To'o is also eyeing a return from a hamstring injury this week. And as for the Roosters, they were always going to have to navigate some challenging times in 2025, given the nearly 1,000+ games of experience they'd lost, but I don't think many people expected it would mean that they would concede 50 points to the Broncos in round 1, essentially ending their campaign before it's even begun. I thought the Chooks started really strong, and they were physical and were winning the ruck, but after they lost Victor Radley to an HIA, it was all one-way traffic. It's pretty obvious and it goes without saying, but they are really going to struggle without Sam Walker this season. I don't think Townsend can bring that kind of X factor or kicking game that they will require, and while I think Sandon Smith has plenty of promise, it just isn't quite there yet. Now, in terms of teams list for the Chooks, Victor Radley will be subject to the NRL's mandatory stand-down period for head injuries, but given his long history with concussion, I doubt we'll see Victor Radley for quite some time. Now, looking at the two sides head-to-head, it's no secret that the Roosters have struggled against the Panthers, with Penrith winning 10 straight games against the Chooks since 2020. Pretty straightforward one here, ladies and gentlemen. Penrith, 13+. Alright, moving now to our first Super Saturday of the year, starting first with the St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs at WIN Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Dragons, they left their comeback run too late against the Bulldogs, going down 28 points to 20 in front of their home fans. The Saints were unable to match the physicality of the Dogs early on and found themselves stuck in their own end. The gap left behind by Ben Hunt was pretty evident to see, with Lockie Elias having a weak club debut and producing some really poor errors. Jacob Little though was really strong off the bench and surely leaves a massive selection headache for Flano, as he's currently second in line behind new co-captain Damien Cook. Clint Gutherson was also kept really quiet in his Red V debut, never getting a chance in space or broken play. Despite the poor showing, I do still think the Dragons have plenty of improvement in them this year, and if their halves and middle can get them on the front foot, they should be a pretty tough side to beat. Now, in terms of teams list for the Dragons, Ryan Couchman was only on the field for 8 minutes before suffering an ACL injury, so will be unavailable for quite some time. As for the Rabbitohs, they had to dig deep to get past the Dolphins at CommBank Stadium, clinging on to a slim 16 to 14 point win to start their latest campaign under Wayne Bennett with a win. Despite being without both Latrell Mitchell and Cam Murray, the Bunnies' other stars stood tall, with Jai Arrow leading the way through effort and Cody Walker showing shades of his best football. Campbell Graham was also incredibly impressive in his first NRL game in over 500 days, coming up with some huge defensive plays down the stretch. It was far from a polished performance, but a performance that showed plenty of determination and effort, something that the Rabbitohs couldn't produce very often last year. Now, in terms of teams list for the Bunny, terrible news, with young gun winger Tyrone Munro set to miss more game time with yet another collarbone injury. Jack Wyden has also been suspended for 1 game for a careless high tackle, and new English recruit Lewis Dodd will be available for selection this week after being ineligible in round 1 due to suspension. It's hard to know whether he will jump over Jamie Humphreys given how well he performed on the weekend, but we will have to wait and see. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Dragons, they have won 3 of the last 4 games against the Rabbitohs. However, before that, the Rabbitohs have won 8 straight and 10 of the last 11. St. George, though, have a 75% win rate at WIN Stadium against the Bunnies, losing only twice there in 8 total games. Man, this is a really tough game to tip. Both sides had their moments of good and bad last week, but I am going to lean the side of the South Sydney Rabbitohs this week. I think their experience in the halves with Cody Walker and Humphreys can get them across the line. I really didn't like what I saw from Flanagan and Elias just yet, so I think Cody Walker especially can do enough damage to get them across the line. It's going to be close. Either way, it's either side 1-12 in my opinion, but I'm going to back the Rabbits this week. Moving now to the second game on Saturday that has the North Queensland Cowboys playing host to the Cronulla Sharks up at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. Starting first with the Cowboys, they seemingly picked up where they left off in season 2024, conceding 40 plus points to the Manly Sea Eagles in a really poor showing. North Queensland completely missed the jump and saw just 30% of the ball in the opening 30 minutes and just 42% for the entire game, which meant they were unable to build any momentum. Thomas Duffy had some decent moments on debut, and Braden Burns looked strong as well, but there wasn't really too much else to get excited about in that game. It is pretty worrying signs for the Cowboys campaign, because I know they would have been, desperate to put on a strong defensive performance in round 1, but I guess some things never change. In terms of teams list for the Cows, Jason Taumalolo is listed to return from a Liz Frank injury this week, as is Jake Clifford and Zach Labert. And as for the Sharks, they couldn't shake their hoodoo against the Panthers, unable to get their 2025 campaign off to a winning start in Las Vegas, going down 22 points to 28. Despite taking the L, Cronulla wouldn't have lost many admirers, if any. They looked really strong in stages and could have quite easily come out on top if they'd iced a couple key moments down the stretch. Adam Fanua-Blake looked unreal in that blue jumper, as much as it pains me to say it. And if they are able to get a bit more from either Hines or Trindle when the game's on the line, there'll be a tough assignment for any side. And in terms of teams list, I don't foresee any changes to the Cronulla side this week, so expect the same 1-17. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Cowboys, they have really struggled against the Sharks, winning just 2 of their last 14 meetings dating back to 2018. North Queensland's lone win at Queensland Country Bank Stadium against Cronulla came last year, having lost the previous 5 straight games. Pretty easy one to tip for me this week. Obviously the stats really do back the Cronulla Sharks, and I think given their long lead time between the games in Vegas, plus their extremely dominant forward pack, they should do a number on the Cows, but I am just going to take them by 1-12 points. I think the Cows need to show a bit of fight this week. It really is now or never, even though it is only round 2. Alright, and the final game on Super Saturday has the Raiders taking on the high-flying Brisbane Broncos at GIO Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Raiders, they produced a performance resembling that of a royal flush in Las Vegas, upsetting the Warriors in spectacular fashion, 30 points to 8. All the talk pre-game was obviously around the battle through the middle, with Joe Tarpany taking on his Kiwi teammate James Fisher-Harris, but it was the Raiders' speed through their outside backs that led the way, with Matt Tomoko, Seb Chris and Xavier Savage showing their development. Jamal Fogarty and Ethan Strange also look the goods, with Ethan's running game perfectly complementing Jamal's long kicking game, which is great signs for the Green Machine. But despite the huge scoreline, Canberra finished the game with only a 69% completion rate, which really shows you how poor the Warriors played, and that's certainly something that the Raiders will need to address for this week's game. And in terms of teams list for Canberra, unfortunately 2 big stars from last week's performance are set to miss game time, with Xavier Savage suspended until round 3, and Joe Tarpany suspended until round 4. And as for the Broncos, they came into season 2025 with a new head coach, a chip on their shoulder, and a point to prove, and boy did they prove it, absolutely obliterating the Roosters 50 points to 8. Despite the slippery conditions and a bit of a slow start, the Bronx built into their trademark fast attacking style of football, with Payne Haas and Pat Carrigan doing damage through the middle, and their new halves pairing of Reynolds and Hunt orchestrating to perfection. Hunt looked right at home in his return to Red Hill and showed why he's likely to be one of the best buys of the season. Corey Pakes was also a standout in his first start in over 3 years, replacing Billy Walters. It certainly was a phenomenal start to Madge's tender at the Broncos and really sets the tone for what I do expect to see from the Broncos all season 2025. Now in terms of the teams list, don't expect any changes. Broncos same 1-17 this week. And having a look at the recent head-to-head record, the Broncos, they've won 9 of the last 13 games between the two clubs. But the Raiders, though they have enjoyed a bit of success at home recently, they've won 3 of the last 4 games at GIO Stadium. Another fairly straightforward one for me. I know the Raiders look great in Vegas, but I do think the Broncos win and win well. So I'm going to take the Broncos here 13+. Moving now to the first of two games on Sunday, starting first with the Parramatta Eels taking on the West Tigers at CommBank. Starting first with the Eels, we'll just skip the Eels, we'll talk about them next week. And as for the Tigers, even the inclusion of Jerome Luai couldn't get the Tigers across the line in their season opener, narrowly losing to the Newcastle Knights 10 points to 8. Luai was far from his best on attack, but came up with some huge effort plays on defence, something that the entire side showed drastic improvement in. Although they had plenty of their own chances, they were lucky they faced a Newcastle Knights side with equally poor playmaking. The jury is still hung on the West Tigers in 2025, but there does seem to be some noticeable improvement. Looking at the teams list for the Tigers, they should be boosted by the returns of both Api Coruscant and Jareen Buller this week, with Coruscant back from suspension and Buller expected to overcome a shoulder injury. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, Wests have won just 3 of their last 15 games against Parramatta. However, they have come away with the 2 points in their last 2 trips to CommBank Stadium. Oh, this is a bit of a funky one, but I'm going to back the Tigers by 1 to 12 points. I think the Eels were obviously extremely poor against the Storm, and Bulkman just did not look up to standard. Whereas I really do think the playmakers for the Tigers will prove to be the difference. If Luai and Galvin can fire, I think they can get past a very underwhelming Eel side without Mitchell Moses. So I'm going to back the Tigers by 1 to 12 points. Alright, and the final game on Sunday has the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs playing host to the Gold Coast Titans at the formidable Belmore Sports Ground. Alright, starting first with the Bulldogs, they managed to hold on against a resurgent St. George Illawarra outfit to secure their first win of the season, 28 points to 20. Canterbury were really physical to begin the game and almost seemed to, surprise the Dragons, and that meant the Dogs had the better of the possession and territory. Sitili Tupanua was incredible in his first outing in the white and blue, bagging a try double and bringing edge back rower effort through the middle of the park. Viliami kickout takes some friggin' notes. Salukut Fafita, King and Preston were also standouts for me and really helped the Dogs get on the front foot. Really, really good signs for the Dogs to begin the year, and yes, they conceded a couple of tries through broken play, but their defense and effort still seems to be there like it was in 2024, and that goes a long way to winning football games. Alright, and in terms of teams list for the Dogs, Josh Curran will be available for selection this week after missing round 1 due to suspension. Dogs captain Stephen Crichton did leave the field late against the Dragons, but it was just cramps in his groin and calf and will be good to go again this week. And as for the Titans, they had the bye in round 1, so they'll be itching to get out on the paddock given it's been over 2 weeks since the season began in Las Vegas. They'll be boosted by the return of Tino Fasua-Malaawi, who missed a majority of their 2024 campaign, but they have already lost veteran playmaker Kieran Foran until at least around round 9 after he picked up a bicep injury in the preseason. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, it's been fairly even in recent times with 5 wins apiece in the last 10, but the Dogs, they have won 3 of the last 4. This will be the 3rd time they've met at Belmore, with the record currently tied at 1 apiece. And as for tip, I am going to take the Dogs here by 1 to 12 points. I think the Dogs will be better for their run last week. And even though the Titans will be well rested, I just don't see them. I can't tip them until I see them. I can't do it. So for me, I think the Doggies win in a close one by 1 to 12 points. Bang, just like that, we're done for round 2. Thank you as always for watching. If you are new here, hit subscribe, leave a like on the video, join our Discord, consider becoming a member, and I'll see you next week.